Here I'm covering 4 sessions near Stoneness Point in West Thurrock. This venue is on the north bank of Thames Estuary, adjacent to and west of Procter & Gamble. The first session was in May and the other 3 in September. The point itself is difficult to reach, but there are marks either side which, although requiring a lengthy walk, are accessible. My first session was to the east of a light tower at the point, close to the pillbox. Although it was quite windy, there were people sunbathing at the pillbox, so I couldn't fish there. The point is a salt marsh protruding onto the mud flats, which are exposed at low tide. I'm fishing at the end of the seawall, and there's reasonably deep water to cast into. The lower part of the wall and the loose rocks at the base are covered in seaweed. On bigger tides, there's a chance of catching bass close in here, but I'm not targeting anything specific today. In May, there's a fair amount of floating weed, which causes a bit of a problem with weed getting attached to your main line at your leader knot, hampering winding your line in. This in turn could cause your rig to get stuck at the base of a wall. I had arrived an hour before the top of the tide and had just missed an early bite. I'll cast out my second rod before dealing with the weed on the first. Although fish can come in close, I'm more likely to catch at distance. So I'm attempting a cast of about 80 yards. Time to remove the offending weed. I'm using my standard continental setup with 30-pound braid just in case of snags. The rigs I'm using for this session are straightforward, free hook, clip down versions and boom rigs. Whilst casting out, I'll run through the locational details. The map first shows venues on the south side of this part of the Thames, then those in the north before homing in on the point area. Crossways and Green Hythe are directly opposite the point. On the north bank and to the east are the Grays venues and Procter & Gamble. To get to the point, you access it via Procter & Gamble. You head for and park at St Clement's Church. With your gear, you follow St Clement's walk path until you hit the water's edge. Once you've negotiated the blocked entrance, you then follow the graffitied wall until you reach the mark you want to fish. Having a trolley is an advantage, particularly if you want to fish marks past the point. The wind's got a bit stronger since I started, so apologies for any wind noise. My second bite of the session is just a little knock, but I strike into it. Not really what I was looking for, but at least this bootlace eel gets me off the mark. Since there's not a lot of action, I had already baited up a spare boom rig. Time to swap over to that one. This rig is also attached to 6-ounce lead with wires, since there's quite a strong tidal pull. It's high tide now and the water's come right up to the top of the wall. Though there's a fair amount of floating weed and scum on the surface of water, I spot my third bite. Unfortunately, the fish comes off on the way in. My fourth and last bite of the session. Nothing spectacular, but at least it's fish number 2. A whiting, which is welcome since there's not a lot happening. The wind picked up, changed direction, and it got quite chilly, requiring me to put on a jacket. I fished a tide for a couple of hours down, but it didn't produce any more bites, so I just ended up with 2 fish, 1 eel and 1 whiting. I left it for a while before coming back, this time to fish from the pillbox. I had been fishing the structures from Procter & Gamble, but I had only produced eels and bass. I was really hoping to catch flatfish from this part of the Thames. For this session, I arrived a couple of hours before the top of the tide. Early in the tide, grip leads aren't really needed, but you do need to be prepared to swap over. I've set up a short snood Sheppey rig as well as boom rigs. I think these will give me my best chance of catching flatfish. For bait, I've got both lugworm and ragworm. There appears to be a few more snags in front of me than at that previous mark. Again, although it's 4 months later, there still seems to be a problem with some floating weed. The snag has cost me a hook, so the hook length needs to be changed. The hook lengths for my boom rigs are generally about 5 inches long. If I'm trying to catch soles, then my hooks are going to be size 3s, 4s and 6s. I'm varying the range at which I'm casting and do try a few short casts with boom rigs. I've not had a bite yet, so as the tide has come in, I have set up a rig for fishing right in close. This has a long hook length and is pennelled for use with a large ragworm. There is a chance of catching a bass in close. There's still plenty of that annoying weed getting attached to my line. Time to remove the boom rig and swap over to the running ledger. didn't realise it was a big spring tide and had moved right up on top of a wall. Then the wake of a passing ship catches me by surprise. My rucksack takes on a bit of water, but at least my bucket seat remains dry inside. The tide has now turned and started to ebb, so it's moving from my right to left. I'm still having to go with a running ledger, since my one and only bite so far has been to that. Unfortunately, just like those waves, it caught me by surprise and I missed it. At least I know for the future that it is definitely worth a go, and maybe even try and crab down there. I miss a big knock on the boom rig, and just as I thought it wasn't going to be my day, I get another one, and unfortunately I hit that. The fish makes a few lunges towards the base of the seawall, but I prevent it from going there, and to my relief I get the fish in. That brings a smile to my face and prevents the day from being a total disaster. At long last, a soul from this part of the Thames. Try as I might, I couldn't get any more bites. No more bites on that running ledger, and no bites on the Sheppey rig. I fished the tide down for 2 hours. Unfortunately, I got snagged a couple of times and lost a couple of my boom rigs. It's not been one of my better sessions, but at least I did catch that sole. For my third session, I fancied fishing the other pillbox, which is to the west of the point. On approaching it, I see a spot where the grass has been flattened. That looks like someone's fished here before, so I decided to have a go here rather than fishing at the pillbox itself. Every time I cross the Q2 bridge, I have a look at this area, and I've always fancied having a go here. It's quite shallow here, and you're casting towards a mud bank, which is exposed at low tide. I'm hoping that some flatfish might move onto that mud bank to feed at the top of the tide. Fishing here, you're directly opposite the factories at the crossways part of Hythe. Short-snood rigs and boom rigs are the order of the day again. Clipping down is not really needed unless you want to try and cast right onto the mud bank. At the top of the tide, my bait is being stripped, but I'm not seeing any bites. finding a couple of snags, but I'm able to pull my rigs through. No bites until the tide starts ebbing. Then I get my first little knock. I should have struck into that instead of waiting for it to develop. I had to wait until the mud bank started to get exposed before I get my second bite, casting into the middle of a channel right in front of me, and managed to hit a tiny little knock. It's not a flat fish, but the little scaldy bass saves the day. I fish it down a bit more and get another bite. I get another fish on, but unfortunately that comes off. Once again, it was only a little scaldy bass. So, another disappointing session with only one fish to show for my efforts. My final session was right at the end of September, and I got up really early for this one. There was rather nice sunrise. This was a neap tide, and I was hoping to get right onto the point. Unfortunately, I was unable to do that, as you'll see in a moment. Unknown to me, there was some work going on right at the end of the point, right by that tower light, so I ended up fishing by that first pillbox. Once again, I'm using short snood rigs and boom rigs. My leads were a little bit heavy for this session, and I swapped them round fairly early on. I was conscious of the snags that got me last time I fished this area. I needn't have worried, since I avoided them by settling up a little bit to the right of the pillbox. Here, you're fishing directly opposite the flats and Ingress Park at Hythe. There's a little bit of drizzle and it's pretty cold at the moment and I haven't quite woken up. It looks like my rig latched onto something as I was casting out. Slightly better with this cast. No bites, but something chewed my worm. You'll notice that I've changed my lead over to plain lead since there isn't much of a tidal run. This is one of those that was kindly donated to me by Tony Irwin of Bristol. It's just before the top of the tide and I get a bite. At first I wasn't sure if I hit it, but I do feel a fish on. A scaldy bass, so once again I've saved a blank. Unfortunately, that scaldy bass was from my one and only bite of the morning, so another rather disappointing session. I know it hasn't been a particularly good year this side of the Thames, but I'm sure this venue has got some potential. I'll be back again in the future, hopefully to try and fish right at the point.